Welcome to building web apps with Hyperapp V1. You will see why V1. I'm really excited about this. The framework is really nice. You will see why. I'm Gleb Bahmutov, if you don't know. You can find a lot of things about me by just doing npx gleb. I got that little utility, so it shows like all the things on my websites. Yeah, I've been lucky that like my name is pretty rare and my last name is pretty rare, so I've been able to snag like all the accounts under last name. So. That's why you have to go to like Social Security office and change your name to be like something unique, right? Preferably ending with a number. Right? These slides will be at slides.com/Bahmutov, so you'll find them like right away. I had quite a journey between different languages, but now I mostly do JavaScript and Node and testing. I work at a company called Cypress.io. I'll show what it does, but it's basically an end-to-end test runner. If you have something that you want to test in your browser and you don't want to kill yourself, just use Cypress. It's free. I have a couple stickers. I have a couple actually people who are using Cypress here, so you can ask for a third-party opinion, right? Awesome. I gave them both $10, so they... Okay, so I've been sitting at home one fine morning, and then my son appears, and to protect his privacy, he says, "Dad, make me a game, please," right? And I was like, this is my moment. Because he knows I'm programming, he has very low opinion of my work, right? So he's like, oh, he just sits in front of computer all day, like that. And you know, he's seen me like, and he like typed in Sublime a couple times, and I increased the font, so it's fun for him. And then he's like, I don't want to do it anymore. But when he asked me to do a game, I was like, that's it, like, I got this. I made 2 games in my life. Well, yes, 2 games that like available. One, I made a clone of 2048. Like you remember a couple of years. So the clone plays on 5x5 fields, so it's slightly larger. But the rule here is that at every turn, 2 new pieces appear. So if I go down, you see 2 pieces appear. So the game actually progresses really, really quickly. So you get really quickly. I can beat that easily. So I made this, but it was just vanilla JS. And then I made another game, and shown here is a little snippet of code you put on your like Chrome bar, and then you go to anyone's GitHub profile, click it, and it plays Game of Life with GitHub contribution graph, right, like right there. And you can find some people who have a graph so that it actually gets into a cycle and becomes like almost like a disco music. It's actually a lot of fun finding those. Again, just vanilla JS. But I started, you know, planning a game for my son, and I like started drawing, and of course, I like this particular thing. Like there is no laptop, there is a monitor and a mouse, so I guess that's all you need. I think the problem is clear right there. But I quickly realized that just writing vanilla JavaScript, as much as I love it, is not going to scale. So we need a framework, and there are a lot of frameworks, and like I've used a bunch of those. But there are a lot more, really, very esoteric ones that are less popular, but still have like really interesting features that the big ones don't have. But it's not enough to have a Vue layer. It's not enough to pick Angular or Vue or React. You also have to pick another library that will like, keep you all your data, so that the apps scale. So you can use React and Redux, or Angular and GRX for Stream. So like usually they're named with X at the end. I think that's how you avoid paying taxes. I don't know. I had a whole talk about like all these different frameworks and how you can compare them to pick the one that you're gonna like, and you know the features like what the framework provides. So you don't have to write them is the number one, obviously, but also learning curve. I don't want to spend a month learning a framework so I can build a game and then forget it, right? Testability was very important for me. If I can write something but I cannot test it, like, did I really write it? You know? I love this tweet, right? Mark was almost ready to implement his Hello World React app. I was like, this tweet really touched something, because I had like thousands of likes and retweets. I didn't want that. So I found by accident about a library or framework called Hyperapp. It's on GitHub. It's by this person, George, who lives in Japan. After I started using this framework, I found out I actually met George in Japan by accident. I just didn't remember it. But he remembered me, so it was It's 1 kilobyte JavaScript framework for building web applications. And already you're like, Gleb, you must be joking, right? Like 1 kilobyte, like who does it? It was introduced in 2017, so a year and a half ago. And there are 3 aspects of this framework that dominate and that like, it tries to adhere to. It's minimal, it's pragmatic, and it's standalone. So let's see how this works in action. So minimal, the framework described as like, we have aggressively minimized everything that's not necessary, right? Tough choices. Do you need it? No. Get out. Kind of like, you know, Maria Kondo, right? Does this spark joy? Get out. Redux, right? Kind of situation. It has to be pragmatic. You will see the principles are, the framework is very functional, but at the same time, you can still do whatever the hell you want, right? So it's pragmatic in the sense that they try to adhere to the spirit of purity, but if you have to, you have to. So, and standalone, there are no dependencies. You will see I'm using just a single library and everything works. Okay, size-wise, big frameworks, Hyperapp is this blue circle. Okay, so kind of like Pluto there. Okay, this is the whole framework, right? I'll give you a second to look over. No, I'm sorry, I'm joking. It's hard to read this on this projector. Okay, syntax highlighting. Now you can read it. But that's it. Like compare, like it's unbelievable. Like one slide. Okay, so here's the principle. It's based on architecture that some other frameworks also use, like Elm. Everything depends on state, or sometimes called model. That's the data you're trying to show. Okay? And then you don't see the data on your page, right? You don't see the data in this browser. You actually project it, like you render some representation of the data. Usually you render HTML nodes, right? Maybe canvas. You add styles. That's this shadow that users who see there actually see in your browser. They don't see the state. They see a render state, which is the DOM. Users look at this view of a state and they're like, okay, I want to click. I want to scroll. I want to submit. I want to change counter. So they actually execute actions or dispatch actions. The actions go to this person who will update the state but gets re-rendered and now user sees something else. And it repeats and repeats. So we have to talk about a couple of components. First, we'll start with view, right? So in that picture that I've just shown, there is view, state, and actions. So view. Here's some code, right? And I apologize for projector. I know it's tough. Basically, at the top, we include a single script. That's the only script we have to bring. And then it will create a global Hyperapp object, and from that we can grab 2 variables, because that's the only 2 variables it actually provides. H is the virtual DOM helper we will use, and basically what it does, you'll see below. App is something that actually starts the application. So H and app, that's all framework does, nothing else. Really, really minimal. And here's a function that's called a view function. That will render, well, but not directly into the HTML of a page, but instead, this little function you see calls H with div, right? It will return to me a virtual div, which is just an object. It will have a type div. You can add attributes like class, ID, disabled, wherever you want, and the actual content inside that element. And you can create elements and then have a list of other elements inside of it. As you can see, we're not rendering anything. We're not putting anything in DOM just yet. We're just returning an object, and it looks like this. Just a plain object in JavaScript. Okay? So we're not changing anything on the page. Let's see, do I actually save it? And then we need to actually start application. Right now we have a function that always renders the same thing, like this virtual object with just the same hello world. Somehow it has to get on the page. We have to start the application. So we just use the second variable from Hyperapp called app. In this case, don't worry about the first 2 arguments, but then we actually give it the view function that will generate something that the app then will put in actual page, and then the document body is like we're trying to select where we want to put this. Like where? Like right now, I'm just saying take over the whole document, the whole page. Right? By the way, so the great thing about this framework is that let's say you have an application written in a framework that you don't like. And you're like, I just want to try something dynamic. You can bring Hyperapp, just take a script, and then instead of doing document body, just put it somewhere like in a widget that you want to. And no one will notice, because the page probably has like 20 megabytes of things anyway, a tiny 1 kilobyte that just keeps working its own little, element. Nobody's gonna know, right? And by the time they find out, it's too late. You're already out of there. Okay, so right now I'm just saying here, and it will just render hello world, but it's static, text, because we haven't done anything, we haven't connected any state. But the state gives actual purpose to the application, because the application cannot just render static text. It has to render some data. So the state is responsible for keeping the data. So here's a more complicated thing, where instead of hello world, we're saying hello, but what we're going to say is going to come from state. So look at the top. There is a plain object with a message button, and that will be our initial state. That's how application will start. We're just giving initial data, saying this is what initial state should be. And we pass it as a first argument. Remember, before we had null. We had nothing, no variables. But now, when we say app, we're going to provide initial state. That's how application should start. And then our view function, before it had no arguments. But in reality, Hyperapp will give the state, the current state, as the first argument to the view function. And then the view function can extract and say, from that state, I'm going to take message. So instead of hard-coding the message, it will say, the message will come from state object that I'll receive as the first argument. And now, the last part of the puzzle. We know how to render initial thing using a state. Now we have to connect actions. If a user does something, we want to do something else. Again, here's the cool thing. We're just declaring a plain object of actions. Like everything is a plain object here. So in this case, actions has just a single action called onChange. And onChange takes arguments. Well, first argument is just an event. Then it returns a function that will get the state, the current state. So think of this as a loop, right? You're not working with initial state. You work with a state at current moment. And then all the function has to return, it has to return a new state. So you think about not the page, not the DOM, not HTML, but here's my action. It has to modify the state somehow. Okay? How it will modify and return the new value. Okay? So in this case, we're just going to return message value back. And our view function now can be more complicated. It will receive a second argument. So not just the current state, but also all the actions. And now it can actually hook those up. So you see here, I'm creating an input element that will be displayed right here. And I'm saying onChange. When you get an event from a page, like user types something, call actions onChange. So we just connected whatever the page sends to our actions. And Hyperapp will just execute those. And here's the complete Hyperapp. It's simple. In this case, if I'm entering something, the message changes, but it shows all the principles. App takes the state, initial state, as an argument. Actions, my object of all the actions that I can call. The view function that actually produces what the screen should show, and where to attach it. And it becomes a circle. So the state, when it changes, triggers view update. The view function runs, uses the current state, generates a virtual model with actions. User looks at this, triggers actions, they change the state, and the thing continues. And each part of this thing is completely separate. These are all pure functions. They all take what they have to do from their arguments, which is very different from our frameworks. or some global things, some events, maybe a use of this. In this case, for example, view, what it has to render, the data comes from state as an argument, actions that it has to call or connect are also from an argument. The good thing about pure functions is that even like in actions, they're extremely simple to understand. You just look at the source code of a function, and you can understand because there is nothing else that can surprise you. By reading the source code, you should be able to analyze what the result will be if I give it certain arguments. And it's easy to test. You just trigger that function with known inputs, and it should always produce the same output. So in Hyperapp, it's easy because there's view and state, and all the functions that modify and trigger actions are kind of obvious. And especially compared to React and Redux, which is very verbose, I have to define those things. I have to define, again, actions that modify state, but compared to equivalent Hyperapp code, it's a lot more verbose, right? And Hyperapp is pretty much nothing. Everything collapses because you don't declare things in a bunch of places and then try to put them together. Related question, why is everyone using React and not Hyperapp? I don't know.
Documentation, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I blame social network, you know. Yeah, like if you think about, right? Like the only big big company that doesn't have its own big framework right now is Microsoft, right? Which is kind of surprising. At the same time, they build VS Code, which is pretty good as a text editor. So maybe that's how they dominate. I don't know. Anyway, so the final result that I've written as a game for my son, and again, because I'm Russian, right? The game has to be educational. It cannot be just a game, right? It can be. So I had to write a little thing that teaches how to, add and subtract numbers. So always starts with 0 minus 0. Okay, 0. So that's correct. 18 divided by 2. If I give it incorrect, right, answer, highlight, doesn't penalize because, we don't want to break the spirit. I also added English and Russian. But, we actually played with him. Like I played on laptop and he would play on a tablet who gets to 100 correct answers. So I think it's a great game. It had success. For a time, and then I was like, Dad, can you make me a maze runner, right? I was like, it never stops, right? I remember, okay, so here's the story back from the day. When I was just learning how to program, my first language when I was a teenager was Turbo Pascal, okay? Written by the same guy who wrote C# and TypeScript at Microsoft. And
I used to call Pascal as well.
it's a great little language.
Very long-winded.
It kind of is verbose, right? Explicit. But then the first thing, a developer who sat with me, who was trying to teach me, because he worked for my dad, he said, okay, you play Doom, right? That's when Doom came out, right? I spent so much time downloading the first level. I was like, yeah, I played it. He was like, why don't we make a maze, 3D maze, where we're going to go from one room to another room? And I was like, that's your Hello World? Well, I didn't know about Hello World then. I was like, that's the first thing we're gonna do, right? Doom. So we're at different standards, I guess. Okay, but all of those counters and that's not enough, right? It's not serious app. It's too small. So let's try.
Change that picture so that the girl is typing and the guy is writing, please.
Okay, only if we can transfer his mustache to her.
Just about to say that.
I don't care about that.
Yeah, so a serious developer has to look like that. All right. Okay, for me, the two aspects of serious app is that how well the code is organized, so I can understand, and how good we can test everything, right? So, because in Hyperapp apps, everything is pure, I can split those functions, all those objects. They don't depend on each other. They can be defined in different files, do their own thing, And then I can assemble the app just by bringing all of them and saying, Hyperapp, start the application. And then a single script. Now, if we write like that, now we all of a sudden have to worry about how am I going to put all the code together? How am I going to put a bundle that I can load in the browser? Because the browser doesn't understand import, no matter what they say. Right? I still have to produce, like, no HTTP 2 will solve it. So here's the trick. So I write my code like that. Use import, split it by file. I have my index.html that just includes the root top-level file, app.js. And then, in my project, I bring this little Parcel Bundler. If you heard about Webpack, I feel sorry for you. Parcel Bundler is the answer to all your woes. So all you have to do, install it as a dependency, and then in your script just say, whenever you want to start something, like you want to start running the app locally, say parcel, serve, and HTML path. And Parcel is just awesome sauce. It will go, understand, find the script tags, understand what you're trying to load, go to the files, load them, bundle them up. You don't have to do anything. Like, literally, it will just save it. And you have local application with hot module reloading, so you can change app, it like reloads it in like 5 seconds. And then if you change something, like it's like milliseconds because it already caches a bunch of parts. So it's unbelievably productive. Like, just and it just runs. Like, it's so good. And the interesting thing here, I don't know why I have a slide again. Oh, okay. So we use that little helper, H, that little function that Hyperapp brings to construct those virtual DOM like H, div, arguments, right? And people don't like it, right? I would rather write something that looks like HTML, like with angular brackets. Oh, see, angular. And I want to say div, class, and just, kind of write HTML, but with pieces of like JavaScript inside. So guess what? With Parcel, you just write your JSX, and it just loads and runs. Parcel understands what you're trying to use, Hyperapp with JSX, installs whatever plugin it has to, like you don't have to do anything, and it just runs and loads, and even has source maps, even though what my browser is showing, oh, it doesn't understand this, but it actually runs. Even better is that you don't want to write everything in JavaScript nowadays, right? JavaScript is a nice language if you're a professional, if you have a license. I can sell you a license to use JavaScript, right? It's expensive, but it's worth it. But in a serious app, you probably want to start, using TypeScript. So at least you can define some common types so you don't reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to look out documentation all the time. So in this case, I'll declare a type of state. It will have only one property, message, of type string. And so my state for my Hyperapp will have a type state. And so when I'm writing my JSX, which is now called TSX because it's TypeScript, whenever I type like hello state, it will actually give me IntelliSense, which is a beautiful thing, right? Like we spend so much time like doing IntelliSense for Cypress, like it's absolutely the killer feature, right? When I was in C++ world, Visual Studio kind of gave it to me by default. I didn't have to do anything, and I got spoiled. And now every time I look at the library that doesn't have types, I don't have any pop-ups. I don't know if I'm doing like completely wrong thing. I was like, just kind of looking for a gray cat in the dark room. Okay, the best thing, Hyperapp, is written in TypeScript, so it understands everything. And the best thing, if you start writing TypeScript, like you rename your state.js to state.ts, Parcel just, oh, you're trying to use TypeScript, let me install a plugin, okay, done, reloads, off you go, right? People who use Webpack start crying at the point, right? Like you. Okay. A couple of interesting things, right? Like once your app grows, your state object grows, your actions grow. So in Hyperapp v1, you can slice your actions. So look at the state. It has a couple of properties that are both objects, foo and bar. So we kind of compose a big state from smaller object, and we name them foo and bar. in actions, we can also have actions that only related to foo or only related to bar. We just have to name them using the same keys, foo and bar. And when actions run, this is not going to be a full state object. It's going to be just a part of foo of state object. So if you have a big object that you compose, you can also compose actions, and they will not even know. They'll still will work on that like little subtree of a state, which is really, really cool idea, I think. Also, if you have actions, like what does Hyperapp app call return? It actually returns you an object of actions. So you can trigger them yourself. So you can connect your little Hyperapp application. Remember, running in like one little part of a page. Nobody knows about it. It's like it includes its own little tag and runs, but you can call it from other parts of application by triggering those actions. So if you call, for example, like this app variable, app.print, you can actually see the current state because it actually prints the current state. It's really, really interesting idea where you can create interoperable little widget. Instead of writing a giant view function that outputs the whole page, you can split it and have little JSX or H view functions that just render a particular component based on attributes. And then from your outside thing, you can just call it by name, and it will render that particular element. And then you can compose the big view. So one team can work on a header component, one team can work on a main, and one team can work on footer. And one giant team work on ads, but it's a different story. Okay, so actions can call other actions. So we know that view function receives state and actions. The actions themselves receive the current state and actions, so they can trigger other actions. So in this case, for example, if you want to fetch some data on click, right? While we click, we make a request to go outside. Well, what do we do with result? We have to set it back into the state, right? So we can re-render. So you can just call action set, and the view will update itself. Okay, most important, right? Like forget everything else, is testing. Okay, now you got excited, right? Finally, the best part of the talk is here. So there are a couple things you need to test, right? Well, at the bottom I have unit testing, right? Unit testing is something that people do all the time. It's kind of like we have to have tests. And by have to have tests, you mean unit tests. And unit tests are good. They help me write like good actions or good state or view functions, all the little pieces of code. They actually, users don't care because they don't see it, right? Unit testing is just overhead. The users really care about end-to-end. Like, can I actually go to your app, and if I add like to do, will it actually be displayed, and can I click, and complete it and then remove it? That's all users care. So end-to-end testing is kind of important. Okay, with Cypress, the end-to-end on the top right of a pyramid is really simple to do. You write tests like site visit the page, find a button, click on it, and it works, and everyone's happy. You can do that. Okay, so I'm going to show the whole end-to-end testing thing on one slide, right? Again, the projector is not that great, so. Well, first we have to install Cypress. That's our test runner. Then we have to install a little utility called start server and test, because usually we have to start the server locally, run the test. So it's always like this, like two shell commands, open one, run the second one. This start server and test will help us, so we don't have to do it. And then Parcel Bundler, because we have to have our Parcel Bundler. In my package JSON, I have a couple of scripts. I have my start, just like before, that serves my application at localhost. I have my tests that just execute Cypress run. That's my test runner, and that's like the command to run. And then on CI, I want to use a command server test, which is just a shortcut to start server and test. And 1, 2, 3, 4 means when you start the server, wait for that port, localhost 1, 2, 3, 4, to respond, and then run the test. Because usually building an application And starting the server takes sometimes significant amount of time. Not with Hyperapp. Hyperapp is small, but a normal application, right? So now I can execute npm run CI, and it will build my app, start the server, run end-to-end tests, shut down everything when everything finishes. That's it. Beautiful. And how does the test look like with Cypress? It looks like this. It's kind of like Mocha syntax. So before each test, I want to visit my localhost 1234. So that opens a real page, loads the app, and I want to find input, type something. And once I type, I just want to make sure that when I type tester, there is a message displayed, hello tester. That's it. Really, just like a real user would go to your page, enter something, and say, oh yeah, it says hello, wherever I enter. That's it. That's all you have to know to successfully write end-to-end tests. This is not Hyperapp specific, that's any application, any website. Any questions? This is how it looks in on your desktop. So this is the Cypress test runner. My little app running at localhost is iframed right here. So it's a real application, you can use it. And on the left, it shows command log, and it shows each command of a test, like visited localhost, found input, typed this thing, found hello world, and made an assertion. Yes, everything is fine. If you've never, yes?
The other part of this, you can click on any of those stages, right? And you'll see the display on the other side. Or is that your next?
Oh, sorry.
Actually, no, sorry, no.
Sorry.
Okay, as this impatient Cypress user is trying to say, when you hover or type on anything, there is a time-traveling debugger built in. Let me see if I have this running. I shut it down. Okay, 1 second. npm start. npx. It's not the same app, but it's close enough. So here, Cypress, I started. So it's a counter app, but the same thing. Let's see. So you can see, damn it, it jumps. Again, the counter ended at 3, right? So how did it look one step before? So you see how it actually shows before and after for each command? Because I'm hovering over this click command. Basically, every time I click, it increments the counter. So if I go back to the click, it actually shows where I clicked and how the app looked before and after. Because it noticed the DOM has changed. I can click on the command and I can inspect the DOM before and after each command. And inside my DevTools, Cypress shows a lot more information related to that command. So you can debug everything, go back, and the more you use Cypress, the more you realize that you could not survive before it. So try Cypress. I mean, it's MIT license, like we're not charging any money, we just love people. I have stickers. I do have stickers, yes. So that's end-to-end story. So I've been testing my count app, obviously. Like this is a video of a test actually running, and between each test it actually clears the page and loads the new page again. So it's a true end-to-end test, and it seems to be working. But it's not enough, right? Like sometimes you're like, I don't want to build the whole application, I just want to work on my component, right? Like just like run that. So for Hyperapp, I wrote a little adapter that makes it possible, instead of loading localhost 1234, you can actually get the view function, for example, plus whatever state you want, and you can just mount it, and it will run inside the Hyperapp. And here's, where is my image? Okay, well, Cypress, Hyperapp, npx. Let's see if I can just show it. So instead of loading the whole page, we're just taking with our code and mounting as a mini web application. So for example, hello world. Okay. So notice that there is no local host, it's like utility URL. And then it actually mounts this thing right there. So if you're trying to work on an individual part of an app, you can just take your little component that you've written, set whatever state you want, fire actions, and mount it. And it runs in a real browser in an iframe. And now you can interact with clicks the same way as you can interact with full application. So that was good. This person is actually doing a nice demonstration of Hyperapp and Cypress testing at the same time, because we really target developers. You work on an app, have the test running, side by side. The test will actually watch your, spec files. So if you change your spec files, they will rerun themselves. So there is a nice demo of this. Okay, so I kind of said Hyperapp v1, right? Released a year and a half ago, December. Hyper-V app v2. It was supposed to be released this week, but they didn't finish in time, right? They still have a couple of PRs, and who said no ducks, right? They have no ducks. You have to look at GitHub issues. But it actually rewrites a lot of stuff, right? Even the stuff I liked. And here's how it's going to be look. So in our v1, any action could just return not even the complete state, but whatever changed. So the action really could say, I only know how to change message, I don't care what else is there. I'll just return this change thing, and Hyperapp behind the scene would just merge the change and create a big state. So they removed this because it's so easy now with ES6 to actually get the state as a whole thing and just add the change part. So this merge is actually easy to do yourself, and it makes it so much easier to actually delete properties. Because how do you return property to be deleted? So we're going to change so it's actually less magic behind the scenes.
It also seems like it's not using like curried functions. It's just a function with
yes, so
parameters now.
right. And yes, yeah, that's true. But they actually change a lot more for that. Just 1 second about that.
Okay.
So before, when you want, for example, to connect an event on a page, like click, to the action, you had to call the action yourself. So in this case, on click, I would call actions increment. I would invoke the action immediately, which makes very hard to write like middleware, test things, because you already invoke the function. If you override the function, it's already too late. So in v2, instead of invoking the function, you say on click, on event on a page, don't call the function, just give me the name of the function, or the name of the action that you want, right? Just give me, don't call it, just give me. And give me the arguments, but don't invoke it. And then Hyperapp behind the scene will invoke it. And because you're not doing it yourself, but you're saying, here's what I want you to do, behind the scenes Hyperapp can, for example, intercept those, stop those, create middleware that runs before the action, after the action. Because now it calls the action. Okay? So it's a big change, but it allows a lot of interesting things. And another thing that's really, really interesting. So our actions, let's say I want to fetch something, from the internet in my action. Used to be very pragmatic. You want to fetch something, go ahead and then just call another action to set the results. But this makes it very hard to test. Because any action that you invoke all of a sudden can do a fetch, but goes nowhere if you're inside like state container, right? So instead of you inside the action just returning a new state, what you have to do inside the state, the action, is return two things. So that's why it's an array. So you see it returns an array. The first one is the new state, just like almost like before, right? So this first thing is like the state fetching true. But then you also return an effect, which is a special object that comes from like a library usually, that tells what you want to do. Okay? So you kind of declare what you want the state to be and what you want to happen. And that effect will know how to update state later. And again, this allows you to insert middleware, intercept, control it much better, because you're not doing it yourself. You're just declaring to someone, saying, I want to do this. And you do it for me.
It's very Elmy.
Exactly. It's all Elm-inspired, so like we also bring lazy view. They take a lot of inspiration from Elm. Elm is a great little language. I looked a lot at Elm. Like people who write Elm will claim, like how do you know that like someone's writing Elm? They'll tell you, right? They're really proud of themselves. They're like, when I write Elm code in production, 100 developers, 5 years of work, 0 runtime exceptions, right? Like, because nobody's using those apps anyway. No, but they have a lot of good ideas. The only problem with Elm is that you cannot run it on Node or on the server side. It's a language that only transpiles right now to JavaScript meant to run in a browser. I already moved to JavaScript so I can write code for both, for every platform in the world. I don't want a language specifically for the browser. Browser is not that special. So that's why I never done Elm. But this is a perfect bridge. Okay. Hyperapp v2, we'll see when it comes out. To me, it looks like another framework called Cycle. But if you like Hyperapp v1, if you really like the way like it makes you kind of separate the state management from view function, from effects or actions, check out this little library called Overmind.js. It's a state library. So it only does what Hyperapp does for the state and actions, but this works with every framework, and it has adapters like, boom, you connect it, and your Vue app now has kind of like Hyperapp state management. Really, really good state management library. Like really, I was just blown away when I saw it. And it already supports like all the libraries that use Popular. Much better than Redux. I mean, if at this point you're using Redux. Okay. For me, Hyperapp was just perfect combination. It was so easy to try, so easy to learn, because there's like one function. Like there's nothing. Really good to organize and test my code, because everything is pure function. Everything was separate, not independent of anything else. And everything was plain function and object. I didn't need to like import something from Hyperapp so I could like change the state, because the state was just a pure function that takes arguments and produces something else. Even actions, right? And if you don't adopt Hyperapp at work immediately, at least check out Parcel Bundler. Like that's unbelievably useful project that makes all the config worries go away. Like even today I had to write something, just reach for Parcel Bundler and it worked. It can even render now Markdown. Just from Markdown, and it renders as a page. Okay. Any questions? The slides are there at slides.com/Bahmutov. I'm available on the internet. I wrote a bunch of blogs about Hyperapp because I like it a lot. But I think the more important part right now is right? Okay. Any questions?
Can you put the slide in?
Yeah.
Yes.
So how big is Hyperapp v2 compared to 1?
It still is pretty small, I believe. It's still like 1 or 2, yeah. Like.
Is it fully typed too?
Yes. Yeah. So it's surprising how much we can achieve, right? And it's pretty backwards compatible, I believe, right? So like it's not like it's using only modern things like, for example, Overmind.js uses proxies, so it doesn't run in like 8.10 or 11, right? So it needs modern browsers. I think Hyperapp is pretty standard, so you can drop it anywhere, really. Great question. Any other questions? I know you're busy typing Hyperapps. Okay, well, I'll be around, so thank you guys.